In this video, I'll be telling you the basic things you need to know when working on a slab for the reinforcement aspect of it. So when you're working on a slab like this, first you need to do the form work. I will talk about that in a separate video. Then when you're done with the form work, the first thing you will do is to reinforce your beams. Partly, you'll not do it full at this moment. At this stage, you just get to put the links and then the bottom bars. This is the first thing. This is the easiest method to use in reinforcing a slab. You just get to do the links, then you put the bottom bars. Then remember, when you're placing the beams, remember to observe the connection rule. You know, the one that should be on top or the one that will be at the bottom. You know, the beam that will carry another beam and the beam that will support another beam, you know. So when you're done with that, when you are working on that beam, first you choose a spacing. I prefer using 10 inches spacing for my beams. 10 inches spacing for my beams. Though this spacing depends on the design. It all depends on different design and different buildings, a structural design, I mean. So when you're done with this, then the next thing to do is for you to distribute, put your distribution bars. Then I didn't tell you, sorry. When you're doing that beam, normally the links are done with 8 mm bars. Then while the beams normally are done with 16 mm bars, except in special cases where you are recommended to use bar sizes bigger than 16, maybe 20, maybe 32, and the rest. Or where you want to use a beam, a bar less than 16 mm. Sometimes some people employ 12 mm. It all depends on the span of the beam. We'll talk about beams and the reinforcement in another video. So just for this video, I'm giving you the basic knowledge you need to know for this slab. So now, when you're doing your distribution, you should know that, first of all, you should know your spacing, the spacing you're using. Like here, we used 6 inches spacing for the distribution, both the top and the bottom bars, for the purpose of our design. For other designs, this might change. You can use 7 inches, can even use 8 inches, depending on the design. You can as well employ 5 or 4 inches. It's all depending on the design you're working on. So when you're done with this distribution, and then when you are distributing, remember that you will have to return your distribution at every end of the beams. At every end, like all those external beams or void areas, you have to return your distribution bar. So when doing that, you should put that in consideration while cutting the bars, so they are not too short and then they are not too long. For me, I prefer at least a return of 2 feet. At least a return of 2 feet. That will be subsequent for me. Now, when you're done with the distribution, then the next thing you do is now to add the top bars for the beams. Now, add the top bars for the beams. This is the easiest method. Then while you're putting the top bars to, normally the top bars of a beam, and then this distribution, are done with 12 mm bars. These distributions normally are done with 12 mm bars. That is the normal thing to use. That's the basic thing to use. Then after that distribution, then you put your top bars. All depending on each beam. Each beam has a design. Some have 2 bars, some have 3 bars, just like the bottom bars too. Some have 2, some have 3. Depending on the span and the load coming on the beam. Just depend on the function, what that beam is doing there for you. Then, when you're done with placing those top bars, now you can return. You now put your return. You return at all external points on this slab. You return your bar and then you tie them. Then remember, this is your distribution. You have to tie them in place with your binding wire to avoid displacement during casting or during electrical or every other work that will go on the slab before casting. So these are the basic things you need to know. Your links are done with 8 mm. Your beams are done majorly with 16 mm, except in special cases. Then your distribution are done with 12 mm, both top and bottom, except in special cases too, because there are special cases where maybe you employ 16 mm.